So, hello and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Next Level Leadership with Sissel. I'm your host, Sissel, and today I have the privilege of speaking with an extraordinary leader who is making a significant impact in the world of business strategy and profitability. So, please join me in welcoming Regina Partain Bergman. aka the Profit Doctor, specializing in profit acceleration and exit strategies for entrepreneurs and CEOs so they can regain their time, money, and relationships. So Regina, it's an honor to have you on here today, and I'm so curious to learn more about what you do. This is really some very interesting topics you're talking about. So could you start maybe telling a little bit more about what you do and who you serve and why this work is so important to you?
Sure. So I'll start at the why and work my way backwards. Does that work okay?
Sure, yeah.
So in 1996, I started a company with a business partner. We started a staffing firm in a small community of about 9,000 people where almost nobody knew what staffing was. And so, where we hire people and place them in other companies to work so that those companies don't have to go find their own employees. So we had an uphill battle from the beginning because most people in our small community had not been exposed to that unless they had been transferred in with a larger company and had actually been transferred into the area. Well, we grew that company, and my partner passed away in about 6 years into the business, and I continued for another 6.5 years. So we had a regional firm by that time. We were in 2 states, 6 different offices, serving about 200, or had about 200 employees placed with clients. And then the crash of 2008 hit. And by March of 2009, I had to close my doors. All of our clients, we surveyed our clients and our prospects, and everybody said, we're not doing anything for 6 to 9 months until we figure out what's happening with this economy. Well, I couldn't survive. I had 25 internal employees. I couldn't survive without, clients. Obviously, I couldn't keep those folks on board. And the way we were structured at that time, there wasn't any way to really keep the business open in just one location and serve all of those others. We didn't have the access to everyone electronically that we have now. In fact, we just experimented a little bit with a remote office. And we were doing about $5 million in business at that time. So it was very painful. I spent the next 2 years just serving in my community while I kind of licked my bruises and healed, And then I was ready to go back into the entrepreneurial world again. But that experience drives my passion to help other business owners not go through what I went through, not have to experience that, so that they build a business that can literally run without them and that is extremely profitable. One of the things that we know is that most small businesses are not built in such a way that they have resale value. They don't have value to someone coming in because they are the business. The owner is the business in so many cases, and they don't have that profitability that they need for someone to be interested in buying their business. So they pour their heart and soul into building this business and then can just close the doors. That's all they can do, whether it's them or, heaven forbid, something happens to them and their family now has to figure it out. And the family has to just close the doors and walk away. And so I'm on a mission to change that. Currently 95% of the calls that come in to business brokers, the broker has to turn them away. 95%, because the business isn't built in such a way that it has value to someone else. And so that's why I focus on profit acceleration and exit strategies. And so by exit strategies, I mean, let's get your business built in such a way that your presence is not required to run it. You are not the business. The business stands on its own. And now you can sell the business when you're ready, or you can hire someone to come in and run that business for you so that you have that time freedom again. And as we all know, when there's financial stress in the business, that causes stress on our relationships. And that's why I say this also gives you back that your relationships, because now you're not worrying constantly about the business and you can focus on those family relationships.
Absolutely. And I read some of your, your different social media presence, and you mentioned once somewhere that 82% of businesses fail due to cash flow problems. And what are some of the most common mistakes small business owners maybe especially does in this area? How do you help them overcome these challenges?
We show them where they're leaving the money on the table. One, help them understand their numbers, because so many times they don't really understand how small impacts make a difference for them. But really getting an understanding of your total revenue versus your gross profit margin, what goes into creating that gross profit margin, how you can maximize that, and then understanding what that net profit margin is, how you can really reduce expenses. That's the thing that impacts the net profit margin the most, is reducing those expenses and helping them to do that. So we can maximize the revenue coming in, we can maximize the profitability of every dollar coming in. And so then we teach them, we have about 40 different areas that we can look at within their business and create structure and a roadmap for them in those 40 areas of, okay, here's what we need to do. And then hold their hand as they go through that. Some of it has to do with pricing. Some has to do, again, with cost cutting. We can look at, how are they maximizing every sale? Do they have upsells in place? Do they know what upsells and cross sells and downsells are? By the way, 32% of people will take advantage of an upsell or a cross sell if asked at the time of the sale, which can be a 30% improvement in your profitability. So, there are little things, just little things that we can do along the way that can make a huge exponential difference in the bottom line.
So in real practice, do you sort of go into the business and stay there for several days, or are you just
No, we can do it. I can do it all online. We can serve anybody in the world.
Okay, yeah.
I wish we could have done that back in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, you might have saved a lot of businesses, honestly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But now, I mean, that's one of the benefits, terrible thing to say, but there were some good things that came from the pandemic. Horrible as it was. There's an increase in connectivity throughout the world that came from that. And it allows us to serve businesses anywhere in the world.
Yeah. I guess that's what comes out of all situations, is the glass half full or half empty. And there's always something good and something bad. And this is something good and coming out of that.
And you and I would not have met had, were we not in this time period, you and I would not have met. I serve on a board for a nonprofit in Uganda. Never would have known about that nonprofit, let alone be able to help them in some way. There's so many opportunities available to us today through the technology that we have. They're just amazing.
So you worked with companies, a lot of companies, to overhaul elements of their business where they are leaving money on the table. Do you have a success story to share? Some of your significant turnarounds?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you a couple of stories just very quickly. One lady who is a health coach, and she went through actually a little workshop that I was doing, applied one principle from that workshop, and more than doubled her sales from and coming right, what the action she took right after the event, more than doubled her sales from the previous year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We don't, as entrepreneurs, nobody teaches us all of these things to do. We think we know what we're doing when we step away from the corporate world or step away from working for someone else to open our own business, but there's so many things we don't know. And when we don't know, then that means we don't know who to ask because we don't know what to ask, right? Because we have no idea the concept that's out there that's holding us back. Another friend and client in Canada, we visited about her raising her prices, and I gave her a suggested price. She says, "Oh, I can't do that. That's out of my comfort zone to do that." But she said, "I can do this." So she raised her prices that certain amount. That very day closed at that higher rate. Closed her first client. We don't know what we don't know, and therefore we
No,
can't take that action. And so we
yeah.
need somebody who has those tools, has that understanding, and can walk us through what to do and help us with that roadmap of do this, do this, do this. And if we take the actions, we can expect the benefits in our business.
I remember the first time we spoke, Regina, you were talking about exiting businesses. You help CEOs and entrepreneurs to find a way pretty early to exit, so they have the opportunity to exit without really having to leave all the work behind. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know that's
Sure.
a big problem. I mean, when you are an entrepreneur, you have an idea and you start to grow it. It's like giving birth to a baby, and you want to,
Yeah.
following it, but then something, as you said, happens. So how do you approach these things?
Sure. So first of all, let me just say I'm not in mergers and acquisitions. I don't actually help with the actual exit. What I do is help them create the foundation in their business that makes it marketable so they can exit. And so it comes back to the same principles that we're using for the profitability in great regard, but it's about having the right systems in place so that your business doesn't need you doing everything. One of the things that as entrepreneurs we tend to do is feel like we have to do it all. Even if we have a staff, we're reluctant to delegate, we're reluctant to let go of things, and we take on too much. And so learning how to structure your business so that others can do that work that needs to be done. I mean, obviously, in my staffing firm, I had 6 offices. There was no way I could do all the work, right? You hire good people and make sure they're a good fit for your company and a good fit for the job. So one of the things there, in my staffing firm, I used a personality profile in all of my hiring that was over 90% predictive of success on the job. So when we knew what the job was and those requirements for the job and the situation they'd be working in, we could tell you with up to 90% or better accuracy if that person could be successful in that job and where the hiccups would be. So it starts, that part starts with getting the right people in the job and then knowing more about their personality characteristics that are going to support the job that you need done and the supervisor who's supervising that job. So sometimes it's like, I can do this job, but I can't do it for you, right?
Yeah.
We want to make sure that they can do the job and do it for that supervisor for that company. So it's a huge success for that company. And so getting that right person in the job to start with is important if you're going to be able to delegate work to them so that you don't have it all on your plate, so that you can actually be the leader of the organization, not the doer of everything in it. And that's a huge starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I also know that, when there is a startup company that has started to grow and become successful and is very dependent on still the founder, sometimes the founder is also it's their baby, as I said, and
Exactly.
they have really problems letting it go. Do you have any
Yeah.
special tricks, or is it all dependent on the personality test that
It
you
is.
have?
It's really kind of dependent upon the personality of that individual. And I would say, and their desire. How important is it to them to be able to leave that legacy? I frequently talk with entrepreneurs who say, when I mention exit strategy, oh, I don't ever plan to leave my business.
Mm.
Well, my response to that is, what is the legacy that you plan to leave for your family?
Mm.
Because if you don't ever plan to sell your business or leave your business, what have you left for your family if your business isn't built in such a way that it has value to someone else?
Mm.
So
So if you should share, what are some of the strategy tips that you could share for achieving balance between a business working time and freeing up time? Is that something special you can give as an advice if there's a small business owner listening here now? Is there something you could
Sure.
share that will help them maybe at least
Sure.
get in the right way?
Well, let me come back to the 80-20 rule for a moment. You know, that we are all pretty familiar with the 80-20 rule. The way it applies to a business owner is that their 20% of the things will create 80% of the revenue, right? We need that revenue in order for the business to be a business, to be successful, to do anything else, it's got to have revenue to start with. So once the business owner knows what, there's 5 things that make up that 20%, that if they'll focus their time on the 20% and then have others focus on the other things that are required to run the business. So those 5 things are lead generation, converting those leads into clients, getting those clients to have more transactions with you, making each one of those transactions more profitable. So that really involves increasing prices in a great way. And then really maximizing the profit line, the bottom line. And if they'll focus on those 5 things, they can, that's the 20% of things that need to be done in the business. But if they'll focus on those 5 things, it will generate 80% of the revenue. Now they have revenue, they have profit, they can hire people to do these other things, or they can either contract it out. If they don't have employees, they can contract it out, or they can barter for it. And so, you know, maybe they need somebody to do their taxes, do their accounting. So they can make an arrangement perhaps with an accountant who's willing to do that in exchange for them doing what they do for that accountant. So as a coach, I've coached that accountant in how to make their business more successful in exchange for them doing my accounting. So there are many ways to add internal structure, if you will, that can take that off of the plate of that owner so that they're focused on the main things that need to happen. And again, they need to be focused on their dollars, on their numbers. They need to know those numbers. Somebody else can be doing the manual parts of that, but they need oversight of that to make sure that everything's going right.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership and development. I mean, I know that leadership development is a crucial part of your service, or at least that's what I've understood. So in your experience, what are the essential qualities of a successful leader in today's business environment?
I think good leadership has to involve relationships with your personnel, as well as trust. Again, you know, to be a good leader of your employees, you got to make sure you've got those right employees in there. So I come back to my the getting that right hire to start with. Treating people right is so important. Treating people with respect. You know, I'm going to go back to my staffing firm days for a moment. Most of my staff were women. And as most of us women know who've come from an environment where there may be a lot of women, but maybe in a more corporate type of environment, we find a lot of conflict between women, a lot of pressure that's created between them. So one of the first things I would do when I hired someone is sit them down and say, now, you were hired because of the skills and the talents and the abilities that you bring to the position. You know, that's why I hired them, right? Every other person here was hired for that same reason. everyone here has great strengths, skills, and abilities to fulfill their position. And so what I was attempting to do was to set the stage to not have that conflict, but to have respect between them. Little side story, we had had a meeting one evening. We took our staff out to dinner, and part of the process was we wanted them to get to know and understand each other better. Because I think with understanding comes compassion.
Yeah.
And when we understand how someone else functions, we can have more compassion for them. We can relate to them better, and maybe give them more grace, when things aren't going right. So we took everybody out to dinner and brought their profiles along. We had two different sets of profiles that we shared with them. One was the Myers-Briggs, and the other was this personality profile that I mentioned, the Rembrandt portrait. And we went around the room and shared everybody's profile. So the next morning, my business partner called me up and he said, "You want to go have breakfast?" I said, "Sure." So we went to breakfast, and while we were sitting there, no, on the way back to the office, we get a phone call saying, "We just had a cat fight." I said, "Oh, no, you didn't. We don't do that in this company." And so we got to the office, and there were two young women. They were both in their early 20s. We brought them into the conference room, and I told them both, I said, "Bring a champion with you. Bring someone in the company that you relate to really well and that has your back, and bring them with you." So we had the four of them sitting there, and we put their profiles up on the whiteboard, and it was so obvious where the conflict was coming from in terms of their personality, and particularly in terms of whether they were assertive or aggressive, and what that relationship was in assertiveness and aggression. And so we went through their profiles with them to help them understand. But I told them, I said, "Ladies, we're either going to resolve this, or one or both of you are going to go down the road kicking rocks, because this is not the kind of behavior that we're going to have here." I have a picture of them standing at the counter afterwards, hugging each other as they understood each other better. Now, did it resolve all the conflict? No, there were still those personality differences, but now they had tools to deal with it. It didn't have to cause a reaction. It didn't have to cause, "You're not doing this the right way. You're not doing this my way," kind of a thing. They were now able to understand one another, how they approach things differently, and have compassion and understanding for that other individual. And so I think for me, leadership in a lot of ways comes down to understanding who you have working for you, helping them understand each other, giving each person respect, and giving them not only responsibility, but authority. So many times we give responsibility, but we don't give the authority that should go with that responsibility. So allowing them to have the authority to do the job that you've assigned them to do, and whatever that means for that job. To me, oh, thank you. To me, that's a huge part of leadership.
Okay, so I'm all about small businesses, and given the rapidly changing business landscape, how important do you think it is with innovation, and what kind of advice would you give business owners to foster a culture of innovation, if that's important?
Absolutely important. 100% agree that innovation is important, and fostering that so that it's I had this conversation with somebody this week about that the trickle up or bubble up instead of trickle down, right? All innovation and everything shouldn't come always from the top level. It should come from the bottom up, and we should respect it and encourage it, and give them the tools that they need to spread their wings and be innovative. Give them guidelines of how to function within this framework, but definitely be creative and innovative in the process of doing it. I think it's absolutely imperative that we allow our people to be, and not only allow, encourage them to be innovative and creative within a framework. There are certain guidelines that we have to stay within, right? To be legally to be legal, I should say, so that we're not breaking any laws, we're not doing anything wrong. There are guidelines. And so, operating within that framework, but absolutely innovation and creativity are important from everyone, every level.
Super, super. I love this. So I think I would like to close with one question before we wrap it up. And I want you to talk a little bit about future trends. So what do you see as the biggest trend in business strategy and profitability for the next maybe 5 years or so? And how should especially maybe small business owners prepare for these changes?
Wow, that's a big question.
You don't have to answer if you don't.
Give me just a second here.
Yeah.
Biggest trends. I think one of the big things that we're seeing, and hopefully it will continue, and that is the diversity and inclusion aspects of the job. Just as I set the stage with my staff when they came on, that everybody has something to contribute, and none of us are above anybody else. We all have something to contribute. And I think we're seeing more and more of that kind of movement. And I think it's critical that we do. After we mentioned the pandemic before, and we know that there was this exodus of employees during that period of time, wanting out of those environments that were not supportive of them. As businesses, if we want to succeed, we have to honor the people that we have working for us. We can't treat them anybody less. Whatever less is, we can't treat anybody less. Everybody needs our respect. They need our confidence, having confidence in them, because when you've hired the right person and you've trained them properly, now you can have confidence in their ability and give them that freedom we talked about a moment ago to be creative, to be innovative. I think that those all go hand in hand. And I think the sooner people get on board with that level of, again, respecting everyone and giving them their reins, as it were, to actually have the company's best interest at heart and help the company grow. I think the sooner we do that in our organizations, the better our organizations will be, the more people will want to work for it. We're then stepping into that leadership role of that people want to follow us. They want us to be their leader, as opposed to wanting to run away.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. Regina, it has been an absolute pleasure to having you on this show today, and your insights and strategies for accelerating profitability and creating sustainable business success are truly invaluable. And for our listeners who want to learn more about or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can reach out to me through my email at regina@bridgeportstrategy.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn, Regina Partain Bergman on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two easiest ways.
Yeah, and I will also include them in the caption underneath.
Excellent.
The video. So thank you once again for sharing your time and wisdom with us, and for my audience, thank you for turning into this episode of Next Level Leadership with Sissel. So stay tuned for more inspiring stories and expert insights from phenomenal women around the globe. Until next time, keep striving for the next level of your leadership journey.